Well, I'm joined now by defence and security analyst Professor Michael Clarke. A bit gloomy, Rutte's assessment, isn't it? Talking, about possibly return to the war to end all wars.
Yes, I mean, he's trying to shock European publics, I think, and politicians into a realisation of where he thinks we might be. Whether it was right for him as Secretary-General of NATO to say this, as opposed to people like me, who don't carry any political weight, is another question. But I mean, what he's saying, in a way, is, we've got to realise that we've lived through a uniquely secure period of European history. The wars that our grandparents endured were much more typical of the last 1,000 years of European history. So it's much more likely that the future will resemble the last 1,000 years than the last 80 or 90. And we've got to get used to that. What we're really looking at is the distinct possibility of some sort of military confrontation with Russia, a confrontation. That's not necessarily a war, but that's becoming more and more likely, particularly as the United States may be detaching itself from Europe, which makes a confrontation between the Europeans and Russia much more likely. But what he's saying is what the chiefs have been saying, the military chiefs have been saying now for the last 2 or 3 years. If we are to avoid an all-out cataclysmic war, we have to be prepared, we have to deter it, which means you've got to be prepared to fight it. You can't avoid it just by diplomatic means or by hoping that in the case of the sort of country that Russia has become over the last 20 years, not forever, but over the last 20 years, then the only way to be sure, reasonably sure, that we can avoid a war is genuinely to be prepared to fight one. And that means we've got to mobilise ourselves psychologically as well as physically in a way that we, as our generation, never thought we'd have to again. That's what he's saying. Whether he'll be believed, I don't know. But there's a philosophical basis behind it, as well as a policy issue that we can't pretend we can do this just by inconveniencing ourselves. We have to make a commitment to avoiding war by deterring it.
It's quite gloomy assessment, nevertheless.
It's not cheerful.
Yeah, no. Meanwhile, of course, we had the British soldier that died in Ukraine was named Lance Corporal George Hooley of the Parachute Regiment. Now, Russia are saying Britain needs to explain what he was doing in Ukraine. Do they have a point?
Yes, it's not really. It's officially a secret, but it's not a secret in the sense that we've always made it pretty clear. We're helping Ukraine. We're taking lessons from the way the war is going in Ukraine, as everybody else is, to try and understand the systems that really work and what can be done against them.
But we're not going to be fighting on the front line, and obviously, if a soldier dies, it then leads to people thinking, well, hang on, were they on the front line?
Yeah, well, the MOD says not, and I think that's absolutely the case. That this was some sort of freak accident in a weapon demonstration process or a weapon testing process, and something went obviously badly wrong. Interestingly, that Lance Corporal Hooley was in the Parachute Regiment, because the Parachute Regiment and the Royal Marines are our two elite forces. They're not special forces, not like SAS, but there are two elite units, and it's interesting that it's members of, in this case, a Parachute Regiment, who may have been involved in observing what was going on. Now, the Russians are bound to say this, they're bound to try to make capital out of it, but there's never been any particular secret that in trying to help Ukraine, we have people engaged in Ukraine, we have advisors in Kiev, we don't say who they are, but there are advisors in Kiev because we're trying to help. And there are, of course, a lot of British personnel in private security firms who are involved in helping offer security to the Ukrainian government. So there's a lot of Brits in Ukraine in various ways, and that's not surprising, just as there are Chinese soldiers who've turned up on the front line on the Russian side, and North Koreans, not just in Kursk, who've turned up on the front line, and lots of Africans who turned up on the front line. That's not surprising. But the Russians were bound to make the most of this as a propaganda coup. When they say, you've got to come clean, well, the British government is saying as much as it's ever going to say. Yes, we're helping the Ukrainians. That's no surprise.